aftermath, I just decided I think it's probably a good time to get on with this one and discuss this, because there's no doubt that things have happened since that time. And pretty much what I said previously back in when I did this webinar some weeks ago, back in November, it's been playing out as I suspected. By and large, it's the government wheels turn very, very slow. And that's been my experience having worked with governments. And yeah, they tend to work very, very slow in practice, and governments can take months rather than weeks to get moving on this kind of stuff. So I'm going to give some kind of help and some guidance on this stuff as to what I see is next and what's going on. So obviously I'm not giving any advice on this. I'm just going to give you my thoughts and my opinions on this and educating you. None of this obviously applies to your own professional situation or circumstances and things like that. So it's basically, let's go from here. Nothing takes into account, what ASIC can be doing at this exact moment, or did yesterday, or did in 3 weeks' time, because it's more just giving you some guidance to how to combat this. So just obviously get rid of distractions, and if you've got any questions, my team will put put them up in the Q&A for now. Don't use the chat if you can help it, because the Q&A will make sure that they get answered correctly. And whereas in chat, we tend to get a lot of chat coming through, and I prefer to keep that open. So just please make sure that the Q&A gets used. And of course, we'll be providing our support email at the end if in the event that, you need some help. So, okay. So I just want to quickly remind a bit of revision, and I want to emphasize this again, like many people still haven't really acted on this. And I was acting with this myself at the time and before, because I know that the faster you act, the easier it is. As things get harder and bigger, and once notices and ASIC start taking enforcement action, it starts getting harder. So the best time to be dealing with this is early in the piece. So if you haven't taken action on this yet, you want to be doing it pretty darn quickly, and at least deciding one way or other the path you're going to do, because really, the best way to win a war is not to fight in the first place and kill the war before it starts. And being a lawyer who's very experienced and skilled at the art of legal warfare, you'd be amazed how little I do it, because I do everything to keep out of it. Now, it's a little bit like someone who's a black belt in martial arts, third or fourth dan. I mean, they know they could beat the crap out of anyone, and yet a really evolved martial arts will be doing everything in their power not to fight. So that's kind of how you want to see this. You want to be doing everything in your power not to fight, because it's more important to win by strategy. And remember, behind these government entities that are overwhelming, there's normal people with normal jobs who are just turning up. They got mortgages to pay, the same financial pressure that all of you have got. It's just knowing that the pen is actually mightier than the sword, and things like that. So some are saying there's problems with the sound. If anyone else is having that specifically, let us know. Otherwise, we'll just keep moving on. So there's an order of creation where basically God's law is higher than government laws, and knowing this, the secret can help you escape. It's one of my favorite things I like to remind people. This is a really good thing to always keep in mind with any of these kind of things. That really, it's when you move into contract with something that you're bound by it. So by and large, you're sovereign. You don't have to use a company if you don't want to. If you do use a company and move into the ASIC system, which is run by ASIC as a private entity by and large, as many of you probably know, you got to some degree, work within the rules of the contract. And that's how law basically works in a uniform commercial sound and everything, code and everything like that. So just a bit of a revision on what I taught in the webinar previously. Just go back onto our YouTube channel or our site, and you'll find the videos, because I've done 2 previous trainings on this. I did one on the director's ID. I did some questions and answers. So I'm not going to go over this all that much, just a quick refresher. I mean, everyone's supposed to get one if you've got a company. And all I tell people is that it's a little bit like Google. They own the sandpit, they make the rules. If ASIC right now own the company database, then by and large, they're going to make the rules. And they're going to fit in with their little friends over in their IMF New World Order or whatever else they want to do. So to create a single source, this is what they say. protecting the privacy. Supposedly they'll make up whatever, stuff that sounds good, even if it's not. And yeah, so all this is just kind of a refresher as to how this all works and plays out. So there's also the social credits factor. This is the big one that I think concerns many people. And honestly, I hate to say it, but with very, very good reasons on a logical level. I even had a client today who I don't happens to be on here, who discovered living overseas that their driver's license had been cancelled, and they're completely astonished, couldn't be anywhere near the road. And it just turned out that because they didn't vote an election 14 months ago, they got a fine, and then the fine wasn't paid because they never got the fine. So they got their license taken away from them. Now, that's giving you a little bit of indication of the sort of stuff and how this is potentially going. And so there's no doubt in my mind that if they can get enough people into an ID system and then eventually link the ID to bank accounts and link it to an electronic financial system or whatever else, and then you happen to be naughty and you protest in a way which they don't like, or you happen to not eat vegan or whatever else they make up or gets made up, then it can cause complications, as what happened in Canada. Now, again, this is an extreme view, some would say. I think logically what we're seeing seems to suggest it's probably quite a logical view. And you certainly want to be prepared and at least know what you're doing if you're going to be getting the director's ID and being prepared how to deal with it. And at the same time, also knowing the risks if you don't get it and how it can be vulnerable and compromise your asset protection. So everything has its pro and con. So as you know, once you've got one of these things, you got it forever. It's your lovely little legacy that you'll be leaving. This is what the ATO said at the time. Those of you who were there remembered what I specifically said at the training. I said that in practice, the wheels go slowly, and although they're saying they're going to fine you, the reality is they're not really going to be, doing a lot. It's going to take them a while to start hitting people with notices. And fines will be a last resort, would be my prediction, but I can't guarantee based on the way I read the legislation. And so far it's playing out exactly as I thought it would. I used to work as a public servant for 10 years. I've been involved in helping clients. I used to be a lawyer in my dim, dark, evil life. I'm now not. I gave up my license many years ago, very much voluntarily and very much wanting to get out of it. And to the chagrin of the board, funny enough, they tried to talk me out of it, but I did. So I know very, very much firsthand how things work in the real world. And so there's still time in this process, but you don't want to keep leaving it, because once they decide to start issuing their fines, you're going to hit them and it'll be very hard to get out of them, will be my guess. So best to get onto this now one way or the other. So they do talk about these penalties and up to that. Keep in mind, many speeding fines, if you read legislation, are up to all kinds of insane amounts, but in practice, they don't do that. So in practice, they'll probably have an initial fine, then they'll have another fine for someone incredibly naughty, and then a final fine. That's going to be my guess. So you can apply for a director's ID and register, and it goes on. This is the stuff we mentioned here. And when you read these strict liability principles, that's why I said it's going to be very hard to get out of the fine if you get hit one. So it's and giving a deliberately wrong number, you just don't want to do that kind of stuff. So there's a bit of a process you can see here, and there's infringement notices like speeding fines and things like that. So it really there's a process. So that's why there's still ways. At the time, I gave 5 ways to handle this. Number 1 was to contest and resist it. Personally, I think that's fruitless, just simply because if Google own the sandpit, they make the rules. Likewise, if ASIC own the company sandpit, they're going to make the rules. Get someone else to do it in their name. That is done by people. I will very openly, transparently say that's actually worked out for me in that way, because my business partner, she's very awake, extremely awake, Grace, and she was quite happy to put her name and put the director's ID, because she knows I can cover her butt and make sure that, but even if they do decide to go on a little bit of social credits rampage, it's going to be, the business will by and large be able to be owned indirectly by other entities that keep that protected. So that is an option, to find someone else who's very happy to do it. That is another way to use an offshore foreign company, not really recommended because they the best way to go, but is one way people can do it on principle and then not register it. But technically you are supposed to register it in Australia if you're doing business in Australia. But yeah, like for investments, you can set up an offshore company. That's what I mentioned before. This is a most popular way I think people will actually go. They will use individuals in business as trustees for a trust. Any lawyer will tell you that running a business through a structure like that is fraught with danger. And I can tell you that from personal experience, that if your business gets in a major tax debt, you could potentially still be individually liable despite having a trust with the way the tax debt works, whereas in a company, it's much easier to deal with that. And the same even with lawsuits. So this is a structure that does give you better protection than being as a sole trader or partnership, but still has some vulnerabilities which companies don't have. The fifth one is you comply and play the game, but with a clear backup plan. And I'm encouraging people to, by and large, go with that unless they have a clear objection on principle. And if that's the case, you've got to trust that. So since it's all happened, the question arises, what is the aftermath of the director's ID? So now that we summarize the background and things like that, the governments haven't been issuing penalties en masse. That's the first thing I've noticed. It's played out exactly as I suspected it was going to happen. That they seem to be giving a transition period to people. That seems to be the very, very good news. And again, I think partly it's more just being nice to people and things like that and stuff like that. So they seem to be giving a transition period in doing it. My original comments also seem relevant. I think it's going to be very similar. I think you'll probably find that there'll be a first offence notice, there'll be a second offence, or by not doing it or going to court. I mean, I don't think it'll be an automatic $13,200 fine, although it's possible. I think it's more likely to be something different, but if you can test it in court or something like that, or leave it within a certain time, but we'll see what happens and what plays out. The main thing is you got time. I just suggest people actually deal with it because only a matter of time. And as we learned with the COVID thing, once they shut the door and decided, like, for example, with vaccine exemptions, they're going to stop doctors giving it, it was too late, and things like that. It was much harder to get it than it, say, was at one stage in 2021. So the good news is since that time, it's become I've been able to come up with some options with further ways that I think can work very well with the director's ID. And I emphasize with this, I thought long and hard about sharing this for two reasons. Number one is that, technically, I'm giving away something that's really helpful and things like that. But I decided in the end that I really do want to make sure people can go away and use this quite well. So I'm going to share it in principle. Keep in mind, it's quite convoluted. And number two, which goes to that, is I emphasize I'm not providing legal advice or tax advice in relation to this. Things like that. So I'm emphasizing that. So on that clear disclaimer, I'm going to say it would depend on why you don't want the director's ID. That's a really important thing to work out in your own mind. Is it a matter of principle and you're like, to the government, they can basically go and take a hike. They can take their social credits and put it where the sun don't shine. Is that where you're coming from? And if that's the case, that's one way to go. Or you don't really care so much about that because you're more like, well, I mean, my name's on everything. I've got tax file number. I've got this. I've got cookies on my phone. I've got tracking. I've got ad software. I mean, I'm tracked basically right up through my nose. I mean, that part I can live with. It doesn't really bother me. It's just that I can see that you're going to use this for nefarious purposes. So if you're a in principle person of doing it, then I can't really, my workaround won't really help you. If you really are, I don't want it in principle, then your options are much different. It goes back to these ones here. If you're an in principle person, you've either got take them on and say, hey, let's try ways of arguing it with them or changing my constitution and removing them and kind of take them head on. That's one way. Put someone else to do it for you and kind of stay in the background is another way if you're on principle, or use this process, but except that you're compromising all of your asset protection and things like that. So that's what you would do if on principle, you can say they can go and take a hike and put a carrot up their bums. If you're more saying, no, look, this is what worries me. I'm very, 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 very worried about this. This is what I don't like. I want to minimize it. Then what I'm going to share with you today can probably give you at least a workaround that's worth considering. So there's a couple of ones here. Business trust or shell company arrangements. So what you're effectively doing is you have, this is option one. So there's two workarounds. One is you have a company which gets the director's ID, but basically effectively has an agreement to try and squirrel money over to some kind of trust of individual trustees in the background, but just basically isn't doing any risky activities. It's just an asset holding entity. And then basically you have the company. So the company becomes like a blank shell in how it's doing it, really. It just comes in and goes out. So that's option one. Option two is really a variant of option one. It's pretty much the same thing, but you kind of set it up even more clearly. So rather than just doing it, you have what's called an agency or bare trust agreement, very similar to what some of the big companies do, where what you're doing is the company really is just a fund receiving entity. It's all it does. So in other words, you don't think of it as a structure in its own right. When I was a lawyer, I used to use a structure like this. For example, like let's say, like I've had a client who had a network marketing issue and they were moving offshore to live and they wanted to set up offshore. But the problem is that particular network marketing company refused to put money into certain countries. So so in that situation, for example, we wanted to use a Hong Kong company, but this particular client, Hong Kong was not on the approved list for monies to be sent by the network marketing company. So what we did was we set up a company in the UK or US, which was on the approved list. And although it's technically taxable, it was a purely agency company, which means any monies remitted were going to be deducted off the income. So it meant that basically the profits over in the overseas company was next to nothing. So there wasn't really a tax issue. I mean, this way, and they also solved their network marketing issue with their provider. So that's what we basically did. So we set up a US or UK kind of company. We just happened to choose that jurisdiction. Again, I emphasize is not legal advice, not structuring advice. Everyone's circumstances is different. It just happened to work for this company. And then we had a Hong Kong structure sitting over here. So the US, UK company went bang, 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 received the money, and then bang, 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 gave it over here. So this company was like a shell. That's all it was. So that's by and large, both these two options are variants of the same thing. One, it's actually like an agreement where it's effectively owned by this one or it's indirectly linked. This one here is a bit cleaner in some ways because it's not really owning this company. It just pays the money out of there. This one over here, it's more just a social credits purely protector and keeps things by and large pretty pure. So basically you would need to see a specialist or, go see your accountant or go see someone if you want to get guidance on which one to do. Because really, like I said, everyone's circumstance is different. It's very important you don't do anything you don't understand. By and large, though, both of these are pretty similar. They're both having a company which really doesn't do much other than trade with the customers. So if someone sues you, the tax office comes after you, nasty things happen to you, you can and there's not much money in there. If the government suddenly switch off the fountain because of digital ID, you might lose a little bit of money sitting in there, but by and large, it's not going to affect you as much because the big, moolah or dosh has got out of it and you kept yourself pretty well protected. So, and this is pretty similar, and each has their pros and cons as to what works better depending on what you're trying to achieve. So the idea is basically you get the director's ID in one of these companies, but the company actually just simply receiving money, you're upfront, and if they do a social credits thing for you, it doesn't really bother you because the real value and wealth of the company is over here somewhere else. So it doesn't really affect you. You're like, yeah, whatever, guys. You can play with your little company. It doesn't really affect me because it doesn't really own anything. And if they say, well, prove it, you show your agreements and go, oh, shit, okay, you're right. So that's what that's doing. And I'm pretty happy I came up with that. I was pretty pleased with myself. But anyway, I just have to say that. So ultimately, it's why you're doing it that counts. If you're really in principle kind of individual, then just basically go ahead and do like, you know, an FU, like you serve legal notices on them or change your constitution or call out the UCC or whatever else you want to do. Or basically just, use the individual trustees, but just take the, you know, accept the fact that the asset protection is going to be compromised and be vulnerable, or do an overseas company or something like that. And that's not really something that, that's more something you would want to do yourself and go that path and things like that. The other option is, like I said, to actually go and if the social purpose is concerning, rest assured that I want you to understand there is a way out of this. And as you'll see from the two options, there's a couple of ways that this can be done. And certainly happy to help people if they want to go ahead and do things that way. So really from here, in terms of this is only meant to be a bit of an aftermath summary and then just take questions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, teaching and reiterating stuff here. So who will I get to do this and sort this out for me is the obvious question. Number one is you can just work it all out yourself and kind of go, great, I've got this webinar. Warren said no legal advice. I accept that. It's very clear, but I think I can work this all out and go from there. Option two is you've got a local accountant who's actually pretty cool and who does what you tell them, then you can always go see the local accountant and things like that. And number three is make an inquiry with us and complete one of the form on that one and just let us know you'd like to have a free chat with someone on the director's ID and, know some ways you can kind of get, deal with this one. So that's the third option. And then we can kind of organize to get you some proper advice and offer packages and stuff like that. So that's by and large how that works. So now I'm going to take questions. So I've got a few questions and I'm going to start to do them. So anonymous attendee says, I received a letter today asking me to sign the director's ID, but I asked for an extension. They didn't reply and just went ahead and asked me to sign up. That's kind of what I thought. So I'd suggest that you work out pretty quickly a solution, how you want to handle this. That's number one. Number two is that Dr. Rosina requested an extension to give me some time to think and work out what to do. Is this a good strategy? Look, yes, if you can get an extension, get it, but just keep in mind, but given people plenty of time back in November, my feeling is, unless there's a good reason, you won't get one. So my feeling is that you really should move your asses if you haven't done it. Just do something one way or the other on this, because that's my feeling. So do you know whether ASIC received many companies deregistration as well, the IDs? I would guess the answer is yes, but I don't have the exact statistics. Someone else has said, we asked for an extension and heard nothing, but we never received information regarding this ID except on 16th of November from an accountant. They themselves and what this haven't asked us for it, so it's very strange. Yeah, not really. My feeling is, Jacqueline, that they're going to be giving people time, and governments are generally under-resourced. And there's an old joke about public servants, why don't public servants ever look out of the window? Basically, why don't public servants look out of the window in the morning? The answer is they'll have nothing to do in the afternoon. So in other words, things go very slowly in public service. And I've used that to my great advantage many times in dealing with governments. So they're just taking time to get their asses moving. Why do we need us to do it again? Social credits, I think it's that simple. How does setting up a company or director's ID work with setting up a self-managed super fund? Trudy asks, I suggest that you go and look at my previous recordings and that. Basically, if you've got a corporate trustee for your self-managed super fund, you will need to deal with it. Self-managed super funds, though, is very different, Trudy, to other structures because having individual trustees, and I emphasize this is not advice, but It's a bit less problematic doing it for self-managed fund because it's got unique protections than anything else. So having individual trustees for self-managed super fund is less problematic, but still you should get some proper advice on it. So changing that over. So that's generally what a lot of people are doing. Can you refuse to get a director's ID because the company is closing or cancelled? You can. Yeah, you can definitely try. If you tell them that you've already shutting it down, there's a good chance they'll just write it off, even though in theory they can't pursue you for it. I think even if they do force one on you and you don't have a company anymore, it doesn't mean anything. So that's my comment on that one there. With options 1 and 2 in conjunction with PMA, is that even better? Look, yeah, that's PMA. I'm not a big fan of that in Australia. From what I've seen, is that's very much an American thing. I think there's better ways in Australia to go, but that's for another webinar. I'll be teaching on foundations in the next few weeks and how they work a bit more. As a comment, the ATO specifically announced, and I will actually show this because I think it's important for people to understand that backs up something I've been saying for quite some time, in my particular view, on how this all actually works in practice. There was a article which came out from the accountants advising that ATO are going to crack down on anything to do with private foundations or any kind of private bodies that are not registered as proper public foundations. And I've been predicting that for a while. And so, yeah, if you've got one of these, I would suggest you definitely want to look into this carefully because they've won every court case they've ever done. And if you're using it just for protecting assets, then probably less of an issue. If you're doing it to try and squizzle out of taxes, you're going to have a problem. So just keep that one in mind when we're doing anything to do with that. Can you do either of these options with a bare trust and a super fund? Yeah, look, self-managed fund, as I mentioned, is a little bit different. I mean, that is one way, but individual trustees is a little bit less problematic. Again, getting some advice on that's probably a good idea before you proceed on a self-managed fund. You've really got to be careful to do that correctly. I'm asked about accountant's recommendation. Yeah, I don't really do them publicly because if I say someone and then you don't like them, we can't control their customer service. It gets us into trouble. James asks, does this all apply to scientific directed to self-managed fund? Yeah, like I just mentioned there about James about it is slightly different because the individual trustees is less of an issue. Dr. Rosina, there's a class action in process. Yeah, look, people are welcome to go that path. Most people don't really want to go down that path, but if you do and feel strongly, then kudos to you, go and do it, take it on. Personally, like I said, it's just something that I'd rather help people working in the system and find ways around it rather than fight someone who's made the rules of the sandpit. It's like fighting Google to me. So you want to make sure you're passionate about it. Fergus, mum and dad are their late 70s directors of a company that only acts as trustees of their funds. They're attempting to lodge an application, rejected. Will they take these guys to clean out if it's only the activity of the trustee of a self-managed fund? I don't know. My guess is they're just better off to solve the issue because my personal feeling is that they'll give a lot of leeway. When they go, they're going to just start hitting fines. So I do reckon that they should, explore some advice about whether they, get their individual trustees and whatever else, and or at least showing they're attempting to lodge their application. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure how that one would work, to be honest. Yancy asked, are we going to push for digital ID for everything? Is this just the beginning? I think if they can get away with it, they'll do it. I mean, COVID showed you what goes on in Australia. So I think they've definitely got some little plans on this. So, yeah. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to bet there's not. And I see it a little bit like this, Yancy. It's like, I remember it's kind of like funny and not funny at the same time. But years ago, when I was in a very bad time of my life, like my health was completely ruined. I was a mental wreck. I remember sitting there by the river, wondering what it'd be like if I actually killed myself. And that's totally serious. I'll openly share that. I was in that bad of a state, which got me to take action, by the way. My mental health was shot to pieces. And the thing that stopped me was I rationally sat down and thought, do I know I'm going to go in the afterlife? And I thought, well, I certainly don't want to take a gamble on this one because maybe I'll just go up and everything will be cool, and maybe I'll just evolve into something, or maybe some bad shit will happen for kind of cutting things early. And I thought, logic tells me that I can't run from my problems. So my guess is probably not going to be the best option. So I thought I'm going to have to go and deal with it. And that's what actually got me moving to deal with my life and getting proactive to sort myself out. So just purely logically making that risk assessment. So for me, I just, same kind of deal. I just logically work this out, and I think, I think that logically, if they can do this, I wouldn't want to take a gamble against this becoming rolled out everywhere. I think all the signs are showing that. Someone asked if there's only one director, doesn't make your corporation sole. Don't know where you had that one from, but not to my knowledge. Nancy, concerning with digital is not secure, so many hacking incidents, it's ridiculous for them to be pushing a very unreliable system. Well, it was ridiculous for them to be coercing people into a jab that wasn't even properly fully approved by the regulator, and which had been proven every single time to not work when they'd done trials on it, but they did it. So nothing about this is rational there. Someone's trying to bring in some nasty stuff, which I don't particularly like. So, Kate, as a primary producer, we already have a company acting as a trustee for a trust. Does this structure line up with your business trust? Yeah, that can kind of be brought in. Yes, the short answer is that can be restructured, yes, to accommodate what you're saying. So, yeah, a couple of comments here. A number of people, if not most Australians, think digital ID is a good thing. They are brainwashed. Yeah. I mean, if you saw what went on the last few years, I watched in astonishment, like, at how brainwashed people were. Like, even to this day, I mean, one of my family members is a doctor. Unfortunately, he's very switched on. He said to me, well, Woz, you're 100% right in everything you told me. You know, he said the whole thing, COVID's just blown through the roof, and it's more cases than ever. And getting jabbed has made no difference in terms of fixing that up. And there's still people arguing with me that masks actually worked, and it actually worked. I mean, like, large numbers of people still argue this with me. So, you know, I don't really argue with them. I just say I don't really have anything to say to you if you still believe that. You know, and privately I think, well, you just don't, you haven't, you know, thought this through enough, or don't want to hear it. So, will being a director of more on company valid complications by not registering. Like I said, you just got to sort it out. Just kind of decide which strategy you're going to do, from what I've shown there, really. So, KA says, look forward to the foundations webinar. I heard they weren't favourable as they're cracking down. So, very different having a public foundation to a private. The elites have been using public foundations for centuries, and they're still using it to this day, and they get left alone, you know, when used properly. Private foundations are being targeted, and they were very emphasising that in the article. And PMAs, like I said, they're used in America, and I will bet almost any money with anyone who wants to go otherwise that in the ATO and Australia will not accept these one little bit. So if someone wants to take that gamble, good luck to you. I don't see anything like that based on what they said in their recent article yesterday. So, okay, so that's really answered the questions. There's a couple more last ones. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to discuss corporation sole. It's not really the purpose of this webinar. Not really sure how a shell company works. Yeah, look, it just basically means a company which doesn't really do anything other than receive money and pass it on. That's probably the easiest and best way I can do it. Someone asked, is the end result going to be attending court and contest director's ID? Like I've said, that's an option. If you want to go that path, because on principle, that is one of your options that you can do option one, which I gave in my list of options. So option one in my list of options was to, recapping them for you, was to contest and resist. That is an option. So if you want to go to court and you're happy to do that, then contest and resist. That is an option for you. If you feel strongly enough about it, you can go to do that. Or you could just simply, as I said, do option 3 and use this. Or you could do this. There's another option over here that you could do as well. Or you could find someone else to do it for you. That's another option, as I've said. Or you do what I said here, which is comply and play the game. And I've given 2 sub options to do within that one. depending on whether you do matter of principle or do concern about social credits. And I've given two options as a workaround solution. And that one or that one. And I don't really think it can be clearer than that. So if you want to contest it, go for your life. That's kudos to you. I respect you. It's just not the path I've chosen to go myself. And I have no doubt that if they go to court, they will win because it's their sandpit. So they'll beat you. You just got to be willing to be a martyr because they will beat you. The only way they wouldn't is if there was a massive public outcry and public pushback and change, and then things will change. Right now, I think Australians are very happy as long as they keep getting their money and keep getting looked after. That's the sad reality. So that's just my comments on that. I don't promise you to tell you what you want to hear. As those of you who attend my webinars regularly, like they said in Beef Vendetta, I'm just going to tell you the truth as I see it. Doesn't mean I'm right. It just means it's how I see it. So public charity history directors, do they all need IDs? My understanding is yes. Graham, with an estimated fund of a corporate trustee. Is it worth restructuring an individual trustee? I've already mentioned that could be an option for self-managed super funds. It's one where it's different. I suggest that you see someone and decide if that's right for you, but it's definitely an option with self-managed funds that's less problematic on asset protection than it is with other structures. So it is an option, yes. Deborah, the ABRS is a roadmap to transition to the ABRS. Yeah, companies register, business names, Australian, professional, historical registers. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I see too. So yeah, I'm not answering that on the corporation, aggregate and sold. That's not my purpose, not to educate on that topic. So Deborah, so it doesn't seem to matter if you change to a sole trader, it'll be transitioned anyway. What do you think? Well, the whole social credit, it's a big beast and a big monster, but I don't, yeah, look, there's so many layers to this that we could go into. I'm more interested in solving the immediate director's ID problem with this one. That's really all the purpose of this webinar is. Not to cover every single possible issue that ever existed and could possibly exist. If I have two trusts with company trustees for businesses, could I use one shell company for both businesses? Well, that's one option, but you got to realize that there's asset protection issues with that. So again, get advice. It's not the purpose to provide personal advice for you. So it is an option, but it has risks. Margarita, about a course on doing it. Not really. I haven't had that particular thing at the moment. It is an option, but yeah, I'd have to have a lot of people. So if you wanted to get enough people together, then by all means, bring it to me. But yeah, that's what I would suggest on that one. Okay, so Amy, economist John Adams, is a series on ASIC that's very interesting. Yep, okay, thank you for that. So anyway, I hope that's helped a little bit. Like I said, I don't have all the answers. It's just designed to give you a bit of an aftermath. It seems that the government have done everything I thought they would do. They are kind of taking their time. You've still got some time to deal with this. I think your time's running out. That's my conclusion on this. I would strongly recommend people get onto this quickly. I suggest you either, number one, work it out yourself and make your stand and decide what you wish to do for yourself. Number two, see an accountant if you've got one you like. Or number three, by all means, make an inquiry with us and we can basically assist you, if you'd like some help.